Mr. Speaker, it's great to be back, and in the spirit of the beginning of the year, I'd like to begin with some agreement. I agree with Andrew Little that the National Party are by and large managing the policies that they put in place. But I want to agree with the Prime Minister that the National Party is managing them so much better. Such is the history of these two parties over the time that they have governed our country. Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to the outgoing member, Tim Grosser, and the fantastic job that he has done with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Mr. Speaker, it is extraordinary that a small economy of $240 billion at the bottom of the world has managed over the period of a decade to draw in 11 other economies with a collective GDP of $27 trillion and create a free trade zone and an agreement that will have inestimable benefits for New Zealanders and New Zealand exporters. And I say inestimable because the argument for free trade is often very much like the argument for freedom generally. The reason that we want freedom is that we don't know exactly how people will use it and how big the advantages of having freedom, including freedom to trade, will be. And so I say to all of those who naysay and say, we don't know, and can you name it, and can you show us exactly how valuable this thing will be, I don't think they really understand the true purpose of freedom. And while we're on the government's agenda, I have been enormously proud, of course, to work with my good friends and colleague Hikia Parata on the Partnership School Kura Haurua policy. And the members opposite must be getting worn down opposing this policy when they see 93% and 100% pass rates announced, and when they see that this policy has the guts to do what none of them would ever have to do, and that is to actually close a school when it's failing children. And they will whinge and whine and cry, but they know that in reality, this is a policy that is not in danger of failing. Oh no, Mr. Speaker, what the members opposite and their supporters are terrified of is that this policy is succeeding, growing and multiplying. And on that, I want to thank my colleague Marama Fox and Te Uradoa from the Māori Party who have made this policy possible, because here's the real kicker for the members opposite, is that overwhelmingly this is a highly positive policy for Māori. But Mr. Speaker, as I was listening to the Prime Minister's speech, I was asking myself, where is the highlight? What is the thing that I should focus on in reply to it? And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, that really there wasn't one, just a large review of well-managed policies, many of them introduced by the opposition. Mr. Speaker, once upon a time we had a National Party who would have told you that tax cuts were critical to a centre-right government. Mr. Speaker, this government says it may cut taxes in 2017. What sort of centre-right government doesn't talk about tax cuts for 8 years? Mr. Speaker, it is too difficult, it would seem, in a period of low inflation to index tax thresholds to inflation. And Mr. Speaker, since the last tax changes all that time ago, the failure to index tax brackets to inflation has cost the average family $500 plus every year from now on, in some over $1,500. That is a small change that would be good for working families and good for New Zealanders. That is a bridge too far for this centre-right government. Mr. Speaker, the OECD tell us that we have one of the highest tax rates on capital of any developed country. And yet, Mr. Speaker, it would be too difficult to have a policy of deliberately dropping the company tax rate and harmonising it with the Maori authority rate over a period of time. And so, Mr. Speaker, we actually find ourselves in a situation where we are spending more money trying to stimulate the economy with a partnership here and a regional plan there than we are prepared to give back to the businesses that made the profits in the first place. Mr. Speaker, that is two issues where a centre-right government should be making movement to improve the policy settings and improve our productivity. And our productivity, Mr. Speaker, matters, or at least it used to in the rhetoric of centre-right governments, because we used to talk about being the Switzerland of the South Pacific. We used to talk about being in the top half of the OECD, and then things got choppy around the world and we forgot all about it. Well, Mr. Speaker, in the last year, those chickens have started to come home to roost in unexpected ways. We have seen foreign governments in the last 48 hours and in the last year telling us that they will cut benefits for New Zealanders. It would be easy for us to retaliate by cutting benefits for nationals from those countries coming here, and the reason that that is not an effective strategy is simply this. Other things being equal, people want to migrate to higher productivity economies. And other things being equal, on balance, people have moved from lower productivity economies to New Zealand, and from New Zealand to places such as Australia, Canada, the UK, the US, and so on. They don't want to come here as much as we want to go there, and we're finding ourselves at a loss in these negotiations about entitlements in each other's countries. But, Mr. Speaker, aside from the agenda of improving the tax and regulatory environment and raising productivity for all New Zealanders, we've also taken our eye off the ball when it comes to improving our country in the long term. Mr. Speaker, everybody knows that in Australia, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in Germany, and practically every other developed country to which we'd like to compare ourselves, governments are recognising that people live longer and it is time to adjust superannuation. Mr. Speaker, they are raising their ages of entitlement to reflect that very basic reality. Mr. Speaker, we know that where there are presently 5 taxpayers per superannuitant, by the time current university students retire, there will be only 2, and they know it as well. Mr. Speaker, a sensible country that wanted to look into its future and confront its long-term challenges would very simply open up a debate about raising that age. It's not a question of whether it will happen, Mr. Speaker, but when. And this government has denied us the ability to have that conversation, which is far, far worse than denying doing it, denying us even being able to openly discuss it. But, Mr. Speaker, if the Labor Party had really wanted to reach out to millennials, they could have confronted one very simple fact, and it's this. The fact that in the last year, the average student loan has been $28,000. And in the last 3 years, roughly the average time that people study, the median house price in New Zealand, forget Auckland, but in New Zealand, has risen $78,000, or almost 3 times as much. And, Mr. Speaker, if the Labor Party wanted to deal with that issue, they would not be reading out and counting the Chinese names that they find in the property data. What they would be doing is actually confronting the supply-side determinants of house prices and the difficulties that have led to Aucklanders building 40,000 homes in the last decade, and compared to 50,000 in the 1990s, when the city was much, much smaller. Mr. Speaker, I could go on, but in summary, what we have is a nominally centre-right government that is tied down by an MMP reality that cannot make the types of reforms that would confront New Zealand's long-term challenges, that would improve productivity for all New Zealanders, and that would actually do more of the type of partnership school kura horua reform that actually improves the quality of social services from those who most need it. Mr. Speaker, in this environment, I think the ACT Party has a huge amount to offer, and I'm looking forward to offering it all year. Thank you.
I call the Honourable Stephen Joyce.